Welcome back to another episode of Long Island TV. You don't have to wait till President's Day to experience all of the incredible presidential history we have here on Long Island. From a national park that celebrates Teddy Roosevelt's year-round home, to first ladies, presidential dogs, and a very famous Culper spy ring starting right here in Oyster Bay. Let's go check out Raynham Hall. Okay, here we are at Raynham Hall in Oyster Bay, and I'm with the Director of Education and Historian, Claire. Thank you so much for being with us today. And you've been telling me all about how the role that Raynham Hall played in the Culper spy ring and the people, the family that lived here. But here's an interesting thing. It's not the Raynham family.
That's right, it's the Townsend family. The Townsend family lived here during the Revolutionary War, and they played a pretty big part in that story.
And I love it because it's called Raynham Hall because there's a Townsend family in England that has a manor, kind of like Downton Abbey, called Raynham Hall. So somehow, history is amazing, right? The way it kind of changes over time and the story gets told.
Yes, it can be confusing. So every time you hear Raynham, just think Townsend.
But the interesting part about the Townsend home here at Raynham Hall is that the people that were here played such an amazing role in the Culper spy ring that went on for 7 years. It was behind enemy lines. There's just a huge story to tell here on Long Island and the role that these patriots played.
Yeah, the father was a leading New York patriot. He was in the New York Continental Congress. Their son was Culper Jr. of the Culper spy ring. He was operating in New York City, but also coming to visit his parents here. So after the Battle of Long Island, all of Long Island was controlled by the British, and New York City too, for 7 long years. And right in this room is where British officers had daily officers' meetings, because this house was British headquarters in Oyster Bay.
It's really interesting that they were giving information behind enemy lines from the British to George Washington, and over the 7 years really helped him make some critical decisions that helped us win the war.
The first spy who came over from Connecticut was Nathan Hale. He was quickly found out to be a spy and executed, so they had to find a new way. And that way was to find people who already lived here, who would risk their life to be a spy for Washington. They sent hundreds of letters. Each letter was several pages long, so we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of pages of vital information. Otherwise, Washington would not have known what was going on.
I love the story of the Culper spy ring. It's really a very intricate, long story to tell. So we recommend people get in touch with you. You're hopefully going to reopen in the spring to visitors. But in the meantime, go to your website. You're doing great virtual tours, school tours, and it's a wonderful, wonderful story to tell about presidential history here on Long Island. So Raynham Hall is our first stop on the Culper Spy Trail on Long Island. We're going to Setauket next in Stony Brook. And in the meantime, we're going to show you a lot of other presidential history spots where you can learn about presidents on Long Island. Okay, we're here in East Setauket at our next stop on the Culper spy ring, the Brewster House. The Ward Melville Heritage Organization has preserved this home that was built in 1655 and has been the home of 6 generations of Brewsters. Let's go inside and see what it's all about. So we're here inside the Brewster House with Deborah with the Ward Melville Heritage Organization. Thank you so much for having us here today.
Oh, thank you. It's our pleasure.
And, kudos to Ward Melville for having the foresight to preserve these incredibly historic and relevant buildings in the neighborhood. Tell us about the Brewster family.
Yes, so the Brewster family, they were here since approximately 1665. Nathaniel Brewster was the first occupant of this house. He was the first Presbyterian minister in the area. They needed a Presbyterian minister. And his great-grandson, Joseph Brewster Jr., would go on to fight in the French and Indian War. So he was a very devout, loyalist, like many of the colonists. So when the Culper spy ring and the Revolutionary War movement came about, he was not ready to join with the Patriots at all. He in fact stayed in Setauket rather than become a refugee like many of the other spy ring members and Patriots. And the British were able to use his home and house as a tavern and as a place to stay. But over time, we learned that Joseph turned against the crown.
Hence the name Turn, right?
Exactly.
From the famous show. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's a very intriguing story. And his cousin, of course, was also Caleb Brewster the spy. So we wonder about any of the connections that Joseph might have had to the spy ring. And of course, he had a tavern like right in this room. And it would have been the perfect place to sort of gather information. So there's a lot to think about.
It's really amazing to stand in these walls where there was a tavern during such a pivotal moment in our country's history, and to think of the conversations that took place here with whether they were spies or not, what could have happened and transformed into this room and shaped the country that we live in today.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly the point that we try to get across to all of our audiences, which is why we encourage people to visit the Culper Spy Ring Spy Trail and visit all those different destinations, including this site as well as the Thompson House, the Stony Brook Gristmill, and all the other locations along it, so they could really kind of imagine, like you said, those transformative conversations and atmospheres.
Yeah, well, thanks to some of the recent signage that was put up to designate the Spy Trail, you actually can now get a sense of all of these historic locations in the neighborhood and kind of cruise through. And, with COVID right now, not everything is open, but go to your website, because there's also oftentimes virtual talks and educational experiences that you all offer from the Heritage Organization, correct?
Exactly, yes. So we're doing a lot of virtual programming. We've been forced to, like all the other cultural institutions that are looking to survive. And it's been a really creative time for us. And so we have historians and educators coming onto our virtual Zooms in order to talk about the history of the spy ring, as well as the history of medicine, and many other topics. We actually have a program called Here for You, where we are hosting virtual programming throughout winter and spring to let people know we are here for you. We want to, connect with you. We want to help you connect with one another. We want you to experience the world around you, even during this time.
So Deborah, as you know, East Setauket is also my neighborhood, and I just love the rich history, how all the streets are named after the spies. And while this is a historic tavern, I'm about to go to a real modern day tavern called the Tavern at Mirabel, and there all the cottages are named after the spies, and it's just another historic inn. So thank you so much for having me today.
Our pleasure.
And we'll catch you next time. We'll be here soon.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So now we're here at the Tavern at the Three Village Inn in Stony Brook Village, which was actually built in 1751, where you can enjoy pub fare and a 1751 Old Fashioned. This is the perfect place to stay if you want to experience the Culper Spy Trail on Long Island, or maybe even attend Culper Spy Day that happens every year. All of their 6 cabins are named after the spies, and you can just feel the history of this building. For more information on the Culper Spy Ring and history on Long Island, visit discoverlongisland.com, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hashtag Discover Long Island so we can follow your adventures. See you next week. From a national park here on Long Island, starting from me eating my hair. This does not look good. What should I say? And while we're standing. We're standing. The Ward Melville Heritage Organization. Whoa, that's a mouthful. Okay, ready? I had to think about it. I was like, okay. and some delicious fish and chips from the British era. Do I even say that? That's so stupid. Can you tell the show is not scripted at all?